Hello everyone, this is Coach Dinosaur. Here is a chess guide on how a beginner who just knew the basic moves of chess pieces to plan the opening moves. I will demonstrate the basic principles of chess opening. First, you have to understand the setup of the pieces. Here, as you can see, each pawn is protected by a particular piece. For example, this pawn is protected by the rook. This pawn is protected by the bishop. This pawn is protected by the queen. This pawn is protected by the knight, bishop, queen, and the king. This pawn is protected by the queen, king, bishop, and knight. This pawn is protected by the king. This pawn is protected by the bishop. And this pawn is protected by the rook. As you can see, once you have checked the pawn structure and those pawns that are protected by the pieces, you will realize that the most important piece that protects the pawn is on f7, f2, or on f7, which means if the pawn is protected by the most important piece, that means your opponent will attack that square or that pawn so that it can be checkmated. For example, here is the move e4, e5. Here, white plays bishop c4 because it is attacking the pawn on f7. And if knight moves, queen moves, this queen is attacking also the f7. Queen captures, checkmate. Because king cannot capture, because the bishop is protecting the queen. Because the f7 is vulnerable, it is only protected by the king. So in this video, if the queen moves there, black should supposed to move on queen e7 so that the pawn, if capture, then black can actually capture back. So the same goes with the other line. For example, white plays here, black plays e5. Now white plays knight c3, bishop c5, b3, queen h4, knight f3, and then checkmate. That's why it's really important that we should know that this f pawn, even to black's f7 pawn, are vulnerable to such attack because the king is the only piece, which is the most important piece, protecting the f pawns. That is why you really have to check that very carefully in the opening. So once you know that f7 or f2 or the f pawns are the weakest part of each side, the black side and the white side, then we will proceed now to the other principles of chess opening. One of the most important principle in the opening is the center. So in the 64 squares, there are only 4 squares that are very important in the chessboard. One is the e4, e4 square, the d4 square, the e5 square, and the d5 square. These squares are very important uh, squares in the chess opening because it contains uh, plans pertaining towards the king, which is the king e1 is also in the center. That is why we open up the center pawns, because first and foremost, if you open this move, which is very good because it attacks the d5 squares and occupies e4 square, and at the same time, the for example, black should also play e5 because it occupies e5, at the same time it attacks the d4, and at the same time these pieces can be moved already. You see, unlike for example, you play here, there's no other piece that is open, which is only the rook. For example, black plays here, this rook can only move here, and even he moves on rook a2, there's no way out for you to use the rook, so it's useless to play such uh, a3 move. Alright, but it doesn't mean that this a3 is a bad move. Just remember, when you play the first move, your opponent cannot checkmate you. So in my opinion, every first move has nothing to do with the attack yet, but the current moves that will be played will have a very uh, impact on the future plans and moves or strategy to attack the king. So for example, e4, this e4 has nothing to do with the checkmate the black's king. There's no way that this pawn can be checkmated. The same goes with a3. This has nothing to do with attacking any of the other pieces. But with the second plan, for example, black plays here with the second plan, and then the future moves, there is a plan where uh, your opponent can checkmate the king. Alright, so what I'm saying here, every first move, for example, this move, hey, this is a bad move because it does not occupy the center, so it does not mean, but actually this pawn, once this pawn moves and it uses the bishop, for example e5, this bishop is actually attacking the pawn on e5, and at the same time attacking this d4. So in general opening, every first move is actually not really that uh, has now no impact on attacking the opponent's king. It has nothing to do with that. But if you see some example, if I move e4, I can actually play the bishop here, and if I play d4, I can have my other bishops move on this diagonal, and also the queen can move fewer squares. But if you play a3, I am not saying this is a bad move, but if as you can see, there's no other pieces that is or are activated. Have you think of that principle? So again, this is not a bad move, but the problem with this a3, you are uh, you are not activating more pieces. In chess principle that I want you to understand is that when you open pawns, like for example this, it is really good that once you open a pawn like this, you are also activating other pieces like the queen and the bishop. If you move here, then you are activating this. If you move the knight, which is very good because this knight is can attack the e5 pawn and then the d4 pawn, d4 squares, the g5 squares, the h4 squares, and it's really good to activate such line. But normally uh, we control the center using pawns, because in the end, if you use the pieces to move to that center, no, there's no other way for you to capture these pawns, because you are losing a more valuable piece than a pawn. That knight is equivalent to 3 points, and you exchange 3 points to 1 point, which is not really good. So in chess opening principle, you must understand that you must control the center with your pawns. Like for example, this is a very good. At the same time, you are also opening the queen, and at the same time you are attacking the d5 square. This pawn is occupying the d4 square. So this is good, and at the same time it activates the bishop and the queen. All right. So one of the major uh, moves here is like e4, then uh, e5. Of course, if you play this move, eventually the pawn will just capture for free. You are not going to give a free pawn or a free piece in the opening unless there is a checkmate threat, or you have better positions in the coming uh, moves. But if you're going to give it for free, it would be a not good principle in the opening. So again, we play e4 example. We also play e5. Now the second uh, the second principle that you must understand is that once you occupy the squares, like for example the e4, the e5, then you must uh, also play now, especially the knight, because the knight has a better um, attacks than a pawn. So for example, this knight is attacking this e5, and now this knight c6 protects the e5. At the same time, this knight is actually attacking more squares, unlike this pawn is only attacking 2 squares. So that's why once we occupy the center, we also use the knight on the next move. Especially, of course, you can also play the bishop, which is also good, because this bishop again is attacking the f7. But I do not suggest that you must do the checkmate plan here like this. I do not suggest this move, as actually this is a bad move. This is a move that a 9 very most valuable piece is, of course, the most important piece is the king, but this is the uh, most important piece, most valuable piece in chess, because it has 9 points. Of course, the king is the most important, but the queen is the most valuable piece, the most uh, valuable piece, because it has 9 points. Now, uh, eventually, if black plays queen e7, eventually this is already a bad move, because for example, he cannot capture. Of course, you will be captured. You cannot also do this because there are pieces that can capture your queen. You can absolutely, this is also a bad move, because you will lose bishop and queen against queen and pawn, to which you lost 12 points while black only lost 10 points. And if for example you play this move, now knight attacks the queen, and eventually you will move, and now um, black moves. If you as you can see if you count the movement of each side, like for example 1, so 1 1, now I play this 2 1, right? Now 2 2, because I moved 2, then black's pieces has also moved uh, 2. Now if I'm white, I would play this, then now it's 3 2. But for example, if black plays here and now white plays back, it becomes 3 3, but it's black's turn. Now it becomes 4 3. This game looks like black becomes white and white becomes black. Why? Looks like black made the very first move. Why? Because he has already 4 moves while black has only 3 moves, meaning 3 pieces has just moved, even though white already moved 4 steps. So one is the e4, the other one is knight c6, the other one is the bishop c4, and after that the bishop e2. That is why, that means when I play this move, you play this move, play this move. This move is good, this move is good, but this move is already a bad move. Why? You are moving the piece twice. But again, it's become 4 3, and you protect the pawn, it becomes still 4 3, and now black castles, it becomes 5 3. You are losing move. You're the more pieces you have moved, the more chances of planning to attack the opponent. If you have lesser moves or lesser pieces has been activated, eventually you have lesser chance of attacking your opponent's king. Right, so from in this position, black has already moved 5. So for example, uh, again, white moves here. Example, this is another bad move, because now knight captures the pawn, and again this knight will capture the other pawn, which is the weakest among the pawns, the f pawn. So let's just have a summary again. Let's have just a summary again. In principles of chess, you must understand that the most vulnerable pawn in chess is the f pawns, the f2 and the f3, f7, because these f pawns are only protected by the king. And if you attack this pawn with two pieces, it's either a bishop and queen, or knight and queen, or even bishop and knight. Eventually, once you capture the pawn, the king cannot capture back because you have two pieces attacking the pawn, as what we have discussed just now. Like for example, it's a bishop and knight. So we have here this move, this move, knight move here, and now capture. And even this is worse because of this. Checkmate. So first principle, you must be aware on how you can protect the F pawns. That's why some players, or most, if not most, they play d4, so that the player, example e6, knight f3, they cannot make use of this bishop c5, because of course pawn captures bishop. This prevents any attacking chance on f. So if you play this become vulnerable attack, and also the other side. Yeah, both can attack each other. Alright, so here, check. Yep, which is not really good to play this game. Alright, so again, this F pawn must be protected most of the time, because the king is in the first setup. The king is the only piece protecting the F pawn, and again we should control the center with the pawns. So it's either here, e4, d4, c4, even f4 is okay. Even knight on this is fine. This, but as an experienced player, I would suggest you can play e4, d4, c4, or knight f3. You can choose from these, from this first move. This move is not a bad move, but I don't suggest or recommend such move, because for my experience, if you move this e4, you're already giving space to bishop and queen. Unlike here, it's totally okay. In a long run, this pawn can be used to prevent uh, bishop moving on b4. That's fine. And at the same time, for example, um, black plays here, you can also use b4, and there you go, you can use the bishop. That's fine, but I do not suggest such move, because from my experience, it's not really worth it. Even in the top level games, or even in just most of the game, no, maybe uh, 1000 player or 10,000 player will only play a3. That is a guaranteed. That is a guaranteed. uh, you may not agree with me, but this move, for me as a beginner, I do not let you make such move, because it's not really good opening principle for those who just new to chess. The same as h3. All right, g3 is also okay, because some players, they tend to overprotect the king. But we're not saying overprotect, it's just a matter of protecting the king. You can also use this knight e5. Of course, here the pawn can be captured. That's why black can play this d4, d5. knight f6. As you can see, the king is well protected by the by the by the bishop and these pawns and this knight, right? And unlike this king, unlike this king is only protected by the example we have here b3, this pawn, but here bishop was added, here, which is good, right? So control the center with the pawns, and now once you control the center with the pawns, use minor pieces such as the bishop and the knight and the bishop. Normally we use knight first before the bishop, but you can also play bishop f4. But as a beginner, again, I suggest you can play knight f3. But again, I didn't say that you must not move your bishop. Normally knight first before bishop, but it's okay to play bishop also. Like for example, you play this and also knight there, and you can plan like for example this move, right? And once you control the center with the pawns and you make use of the minor pieces to use in the center, then probably you need to make your king safe. So we have castling. That's why most of the time um, uh, players tend to castle so that they can plan to attack the king and win the game. There are some players that they do not want to castle, and but still they plan to attack, and sometimes they can also win. That's fine, but I but we suggest that um, in every opening, in every game, since you just started, you must first control the center. Second, uh, develop your minor pieces, the bishop and the knight, as much as possible, and in the correct squares, especially attacking the center structures. And of course, the third principle is to castle to make your king safe. You do not castle like this. e4, e5, d4. This is just example, castle, queen takes, knight c3, right? And knight plays there. Capture, capture, capture. And if you castle here, then it's not a very good, even though the purpose of castling is to make the king safe, but if you castle in a wrong square, which is actually not safe, even though your purpose is to make your king safe, it would destroy your king in a very fast way. Like for example here, queen takes, and after bishop move, then it's a checkmate. And even though you make space, probably this is not a very good position already for black, because the king is totally um, under pressure. And in the next run, um, white will have a problem. But again, just do the principles of chess. Just understand the principles of chess, and after that, um, I will still give you some tips on how you can plan for your opening repertoire. We call it opening repertoire, where you need to understand. For example, if you play e4, you should understand how your opponent responds. For example, your opponent might play c6, your opponent might play d5, your opponent might play d6, your opponent might play e5, your opponent might play nf6, g6, b6, c5. These are the possible moves that um, you might also study if you are going to play um, e4. Just the same thing with this, but this is our next lesson video in future, or for this coming weeks. And again, you can still further study again on what I have said just now. It's just three principles, and at the same time, the most important structure, which is the F pawns are vulnerable to attacks. That's why you must protect it most of the time and prevent your opponent from capturing this. And even such not so good move, like for example this move, g4, and now checkmate in just two moves, because the king, this king is vulnerable, because that diagonal must be protected. And if you move such pawn moves, even though this f pawn is attacking the e5, but on the next move that you played, g4, is already a dead loss, which you shouldn't do in future game. So again, most of the time, you can play this move, followed by minor pieces, the knight and or the bishop, and at the same time, you must make your king safe. And again, in the next videos, I will upload another part 2 of this video to share with you the other principles of chess. And I hope you like this video. I hope that it could help you to um, to have a knowledge on the general principles in the opening. And thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more video updates.